Today, we're diving into the prep for what might be one of the toughest exams on the planet, the USMLE Step 1. For American med students, this isn't just another test, it's a grueling academic marathon, and how you finish can literally define your entire medical career.
I think this quote from a student guide just nails it. It really gets to the heart of the psychological battle that is Step 1. It's not just about what you know, it's about tricking your own brain into loving the process.
So that's the big question, right? What does it actually take to conquer a test this massive? We've dug through the strategies and the war stories of students who've made it to the other side.
All right, so here's our game plan. Think of it as our trail map for this climb. First, we're going to size up the mountain itself. Then, we'll talk about gearing up with the right resources. After that, we'll map out the ascent with some proven study plans. And finally, we'll get some crucial advice for that final push to the summit.
Okay, first things first. We have to understand the sheer skill of this thing. Step 1 isn't just a test. It's basically the Mount Everest of the first 2 years of medical school.
So what's the real challenge here? It all comes down to memorizing a mind-boggling number of what students call high-yield details. These are the specific facts and concepts most likely to show up on the test. There's no faking it. As one student put it, you either know it or you don't.
So how in the world do you even begin to tackle something like that? Well, just like climbing a real mountain, you absolutely need the right gear. Let's look at the essential resources students use for this climb. When you talk to med students, 2 resources come up again and again. They are considered completely non-negotiable. First aid for the USMLE Step 1 is basically the Bible. Students are literally told to commit the entire thing to memory. And then there's UWorld, the gold standard question bank, or QBank, that everyone says perfectly mimics the real test. No surprise, both get a perfect 10 out of 10 rating. But UWorld isn't the only game in town. It has a big rival, Kaplan. They have totally different philosophies. UWorld is all about fine-tuning your understanding of core concepts. Kaplan, on the other hand, just drowns you in tiny details. One student even called it frustrating and infuriating. But there's a method to the madness. The idea is, if you see enough obscure, crazy questions, nothing on test day can possibly surprise you.
And then there's the great pathology debate, Pathoma versus Golgi. Think of Pathoma as the concise, user-friendly option. It's laser-focused on high-yield stuff and has these absolutely outstanding videos. Golgi, on the other hand, is just a comprehensive beast, packed with tons of detail, some of which you might not even need, and the universal advice from everyone: don't even think about trying to do both. You have to pick one path and master it.
So you've got these massive books, these thousands of questions. How does a normal human brain even begin to process all of this information? To really get it, let's zoom way in on just one tiny slice of the curriculum: GI physiology.
Okay, wow. This table right here is the perfect example of the problem. You see these hormones? For each one, you have to know its source, its action, what regulates it, every single detail. And get this is just a tiny fraction of what you need to know. It's just an overwhelming amount of raw data. Now let's drill down even further to just one specific player in this system, the parietal cell. It's this little workhorse in your stomach lining, and it does 2 crucial things. It pumps out hydrochloric acid to digest food, and it makes something called intrinsic factor, which is essential for absorbing vitamin B12. This is the kind of foundational knowledge you have to build everything else on. So how on earth do you remember what triggers these specific cells? Well, this is where the real genius of studying comes in: study hacks. Med students absolutely live by mnemonics. So to remember the 3 main things that stimulate acid secretion, the vagus nerve, gastrin, and histamine, they use a silly little phrase: VGN makes very great HCl. It sounds ridiculous, but hey, it works. But wait, it's not that simple. See, this is where it gets really tricky. Just memorizing the list, that's not going to cut it. You have to understand that these 3 things have potentiating interactions. That means their combined effect isn't just 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's synergistic. It's more like 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. And grasping that conceptual leap, that's what separates a good score from a truly great one.
All right, let's pull back from the microscopic details. We've seen the scale of the mountain. We've packed our gear with all the resources. Now it's time for the actual climb. We're talking about the dedicated 6 to 8 week grind where your life becomes nothing but step 1.
Just look at this. This sample schedule pretty much says it all, doesn't it? You wake up at 6:10 a.m. You do your farm cards. You read first aid. You do blocks of questions. You watch Pathoma. You do more questions. You listen to lectures on your commute. Then you sleep, and then you do it all over again. It is a relentless minute-by-minute grind.
And in all that studying, what's the magic number that everyone's aiming for? 3,000. That's right. According to one popular plan, you need to do 3,000 practice questions. That's the sheer volume it takes to build the kind of pattern recognition you need to succeed. So, how do you even structure this madness? Well, a lot of students follow something like the Wern method. It's pretty logical, actually. The first few weeks are a systematic review of everything in first aid, doing targeted questions along the way. Then you take a big practice exam to find your weak spots, and you spend the next couple weeks hammering those subjects. And the final weeks? It's all about building stamina, doing 3 or 4 timed blocks of questions every single day to simulate the real thing. Now, here's a big question every student has to answer for themselves. Do you make this climb alone or with a team? People are really divided on this. Going solo is great because you can focus and you avoid the anxiety of comparing yourself to others. But studying in a group creates intensity, accountability, and it quickly exposes the gaps in your own knowledge. The only downside? As one guide warns, be prepared for egos to be shattered.
And that brings us to the final leg of the journey, the summit. This is all about that last-ditch effort, and maybe more importantly, the mental game you need to play to get to the top. So what's the final advice from the people who've actually done this and survived? Well, it's pretty clear. First, don't try to use every resource out there. Pick a few good ones and master them. Spreading yourself too thin is a recipe for disaster. Second, stop obsessing over your practice scores. Focus on learning from your mistakes. And maybe the most important thing, you have to schedule time to de-stress. Burnout is the single biggest threat in those final weeks.
I absolutely love this next metaphor because it perfectly explains why that final push is so critical. One guide says studying for step 1 is like trying to run up a slippery water slide. If you only put in a low-intensity effort, you might get partway up, but you're constantly sliding back down as you forget things. That final 6 to 8 week dedicated block, that's the high-intensity, all-out sprint you need to finally get over the top.
And all of this, the mnemonics, the thousands of questions, the water slide sprint, it leaves us with one really big question to chew on. Does this whole process actually forge better doctors, or does it just create really good test takers? It's a debate that's right at the very heart of medical education.